r/NoSleep. Posted by u/dark and creepy. I was a police officer investigating a missing person and it was the worst case of my career. Part 1. This series of supernatural events I'm going to recollect to you has been kept extremely confidential and non-disclosed for a good 15 years. I was involved with this particular case back when I was a rookie, only being a police officer for about a year and a half. All areas and people I will refer to in this will have their names changed to protect their identity as well as my job. The first time I was introduced to this case was when my partner and I were called out to investigate a missing person. This person, who I'll refer to as John, was a camp host for one of the campgrounds in the local forest which was part of our district. The person who reported him missing was a middle-aged woman who worked at the local lodge. We asked her a few basic questions such as how long he had been missing, which were about 2 days, and how did she know he was missing. She told us that he would always come into the lodge for a pack of cigarettes each morning and had been doing that for the past 2 months, so when he didn't come for 2 days in a row she became suspicious. I then asked her how he acted and her response intrigued me at the time when she said, John was the quiet type, not saying much to anyone other than an occasional hello. He never bought food or supplies here, and I didn't find out why until one day I offered him a free gallon of milk that was about to expire the next day and he gave me a disturbed look as if I was trying to give him poison. I soon figured out that he didn't trust food that he didn't make or kill himself. He was extremely antisocial and I wouldn't be surprised if he went off to live in the woods by himself. She answered a few more questions pertaining to the case, but nothing that I need to inform you about. Soon after we finished questioning her, we went to go check out the campground he was in charge of, which was only 5 miles from the lodge but on a winding dirt road that went up the side of a mountain. When we first arrived at the campground that John was in charge of, we noticed that it had not been well kept and maintained. The fire pits were full of ashes, and the bathrooms looked as if they hadn't been cleaned for months, with many different substances and graffiti coating their walls. After we surveyed the other campsites and introduced ourselves to the families who were camping there, we went to visit the man's trailer, which was isolated at the end of the loop. Surprisingly, his campsite was clean and had been taken great care of. It was when we entered the man's trailer that the smell hit us. It stunk so bad that I expected to find his corpse rotting away in there, but his body was nowhere to be found. I tried to turn on the lights to see better and they flashed on for a fragment of a second but quickly went out. That's when I realized that the smell must have been coming from his fridge. Everything inside must have spoiled due to the power being out. I went over to open it but wish I never had, because when I did, a gust of wind that came from within it literally caused my eyeballs to burn. Being blinded for a moment, I bent over and rubbed them frantically. My partner came over wondering what was wrong when his eye caught what was in the fridge. "Oh man, that's disgusting," he muttered as I lifted my head to see what he was looking at with my bloodshot eyes. There in the fridge was the carcasses of a squirrel, a few birds, and lastly what looked like chopped up pieces of deer that still had the fur attached to it. Everything was rotting away and the flies that lingered in the trailer swarmed the fridge, which my partner, who I'll refer to as Daniel, quickly shut. We briefly looked around to see if there was any evidence that could give us a clue of what happened to this man. Right before we were about to leave, I saw the edge of what looked to be a book poking out from underneath the mattress. I grabbed it and walked out of the trailer to escape that dreadful smell that still had my eyes watering up. The book felt cold in my hand even though the sun was blazing. Upon opening it up, I felt the world around me seem to stop as the wind came to a halt. Even the birds stopped chirping. "Do you feel that?" Daniel asked me as he looked about. "What?" I replied, wondering if he felt the same silence that I did. "Can't really explain it, but I feel as if something's watching us," he said as his head twisted about. I don't know if it was my mind playing tricks on me, but I then felt the same eerie feeling. "Yeah, and did you hear everything go silent?" I asked back, wondering what was going on. Let's report back to the chief and get out of here," he said while walking back to the vehicle. We then heard a raspy whistling cutting through the silence that caused us to quicken our pace, trying to leave the area as fast as we could. Glancing at the book in my hand, I wondered what to do with it. I was supposed to turn it in as evidence but decided to hold onto it for just a bit before I turned it in. I was honestly curious to see what type of book this guy had because of how unusual he seemed to be. Looking back now, I wish I would have just turned it in as evidence, because what I found inside was sickening to the very core. While my partner Daniel drove us back into town, I started to read the book, which I soon found out was actually the man's journal due to how everything was handwritten and some pages had illustrations. It was all unsettling, and off the bat, I could tell that this man had some demons lurking inside of his head. I will go into more depth of what was written and drawn in that journal later, but as of now, I need to state that if the chief of police that's over my department ever found out that I stole this journal and then disclosed the details of this case online without prior consent, then I could risk losing my job. So I hope no one recognizes this, because this case involved many people whose experiences and testimonies of what happened will be shown. Anyway, when we got back to the station, we had already reported everything we found out about this man over the radio, and they were able to properly ID him. The strange thing is that they didn't have much on him since he's been out in the woods for so long. He had only one living relative left, and that was his mother. The only thing that they were able to pull up under his name was that when he was 13 he had accidentally burned down his parents' house during the night due to unknown reasons. One account states that he said he was performing a ritual of some sort. Satanic or not, this missing person was unlike any person I have ever investigated since. Continuing with the main subject matter, this case involving the camp host has been by far the most mysterious and gruesome case that I've ever investigated. Everything that had happened up to the point of when I stole the journal was only the shallow part of this story, but little did I know that I would soon find myself in the deep end of the pool. What we found out there could cause any sane person to have a mental breakdown, so I'm not going to drop it on you all at once, but rather spoon-feed it. This was only the beginning of a nightmare. Prologue. This series of supernatural events I'm going to recollect to you has been kept extremely confidential and non-disclosed for a good 15 years. I was involved with this particular case back when I was a rookie, only being a police officer for about a year and a half. All areas and people I will refer to in this will have their names changed to protect their identity as well as my job. To continue after the first part of this, I'm going to be showing the account we received from one family in particular who were staying at the camp when the camp host supposedly went missing. This conversation was recorded and then transcribed and is shown below. Officer Daniel, did you notice anything strange before the camp host went missing? Such as, did you see anyone else roaming around his campsite or anything suspicious? Mother, well, when we first got here we tried to introduce ourselves to him and he just ignored us until we left. He seemed mentally unstable and unfit to be maintaining this campground and was often whistling with a raspy, uneven tone which got annoying when we were trying to enjoy the sounds from nature. Also, one weird thing was that during the middle of one of the nights we heard something like hammering coming outside of our tent. My husband went to investigate and found the camp host chopping firewood next to a roaring fire, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. That was the last time we saw him, and there were many other strange things that went on around the camp host's campsite. Officer Daniel, did he seem intoxicated at all during any of this? Maybe he was unstable? Father, we tried to avoid him the best we could, so we aren't exactly sure if he was drunk or anything like that. Officer Daniel, is there anything else that you saw that we should be aware of? Teenage son, I don't know if this pertains to this case, but I went hiking with my younger sister up the side of that mountain over there, and while we were hiking we found something. Officer Daniel, what did you find? Teenage son, well, you see, I'm not exactly sure what it was, but someone had definitely been doing something up there. Officer Daniel, describe it please. Teenage son, we found a patch of trees that had bones strung up on their branches as if someone had tied them to it. In the middle of this patch of trees were rocks that were placed in a strange circle type thing, and in there was a straight stick that held what looked to be some animal's skull. Around the circle posted on trees were pictures of people. I'm going to stop at this point in the interview because he had many questions that were not essential to know, but what the teenage son had hiked in on was what we investigated next. By the time we were interviewing these people, search and rescue had gone out into the forest but never found him. They did find some random cigarette butts mixed in the dirt which tied back to him buying a pack of them a day from the lodge, so they thought they were close to finding him. However, they still couldn't trace exactly where he went. While search and rescue were doing this, my partner and I were in charge of investigating the place that the teenager had described to us. When we finally found it based on the description of how to get there from the boy, we took pictures of the area. It was a strange place, and the random picture of people posted on the trees all angled to where any one of them could be seen if you stood in the middle of the rocks. I examined the photos trying to see if I recognized any of the people when Daniel said, "Isn't this that little girl who went missing in the woods last summer?" Walking over, I examined the picture and it matched the photo which our police department put in the newspaper, wondering if anyone had seen her around. Yeah, that is the girl, but why would someone put her picture here? It just doesn't make sense to me. You don't suppose that these are all pictures of people who've gone missing? Daniel asked as he looked around. Only one way to be sure. Let's take a picture of each one and send it back for analysis. Maybe this is some weird shrine someone created, or it could just be a trophy shelf of someone's victims. Who knows, we might just soon find a picture of the man we are looking for hung up one of these trees. I responded while brushing my stubby beard. Daniel agreed and we photographed and documented the area. While we sent this information in, I decided to read some of what was written in the man's diary that I had taken from his trailer. It was a random disturbing segment in a page from it and goes as follows: "I need to appease it somehow but I can't. It's following me everywhere I go and there's damn near nothing I can do about it. Every time I feel it get close behind me I dart around and nothing's there. I see people in camp smiling and having the time of their lives not knowing of the evil I have just done." This is what I couldn't understand in this man's writing at the time, was that he seemed as if someone or something was trying to get to him, but there was no evidence proving that this was true. There was no forced entry into the man's trailer. It was as if he had just vanished without a trace. Later Daniel and I were notified about who the pictures were of and the answer was mind-boggling. Every single one of those people had gone missing in that forest area, ranging from 20 years ago all the way to the present day. Either someone was being insensitive and made this, or this could be a trophy case of someone's victims whose deaths were all blamed on going missing in the woods. All I knew at the time was that this case began to grow far past than just a simple missing person. Sometimes one person's perspective is completely different from another, even if they are both observing the same thing. That is one rule I learned while being a police officer: always be prepared to know that you aren't prepared at all.